All right, so my texture paste has dried all night and now it's time to paint the flower and the leaf. So I have some colors here. This is the main color for my flower. I'm going to lighten it for one layer with antique linen, and then I'm going to use this red paint to darken it for the last layer. So first thing I need to do is put my stencil back over top. And for this, I'm not masking as much off because I'm going to be using a stencil brush. So I'm not doing big circular motions. I'm going to be pouncing up and down. So I'm not as worried about getting it into other areas. So I've got a little bit of the pretty pink color. I was inspired by some pink poppies in my garden this week, so. And it doesn't need to be super, super light. You can choose how light you want it to be. I just want it to be, so when I put the second layer with the darker color, I want to be able to see the difference between it. So my brush obviously has paint in it because I've been mixing the paint here. I'm going to take some of the excess off and to stencil, tap up and down. If you move in circles, sometimes you get ink that goes below the stencil, and we're trying to avoid having it seep below the stencil or beneath the stencil. And if you find that you don't get quite enough paint on as you would like, you could always do a second layer. But also remember that we have a couple other layers with different colors that are going on as well. There we go. Now there are some areas that are a little bit lighter. That's totally fine. If you want it to be completely solid, you can do a second layer. Flowers have light areas and dark areas, and this one we're going to have some lights and darks with the layering stencil part. So I'm totally fine with there not being, or being some areas that are a little bit darker. Now I'm not waiting for that to dry. I'm going to match up my stencil and do the next layer right away. Now there's little lines on this stencil that show the outline of the flower that make it easy to match it up. I'm going to use my second color. So the reason I'm doing the second layer right away while it's still wet is because I want to take a brush after I lift this layer off. I want to take a brush and I want to kind of blend the two layers together just to get a little bit more of a natural look. You don't have to. You can do each color and let them dry in between and have very pronounced lines between the two colors. But I just thought, especially for a flower, that it would be nice if those layers were just softened up a little bit. And because my next layer is here and it's going to go up, this piece is going to be going on my mat, so I'm not worried about the paint that's going to be on the back of my stencil ruining a part of my card. All right, so I'm lifting that up. I'm just going to move that over there while I do the next step here, so I can see exactly where the lights and the darks are. And all I'm going to do is just take a soft, dry brush. I'm just blending those areas. You can do as much or as little as you like. And like I said, you don't have to do this. If you don't really want to do this step or you're not comfortable doing this step, you don't have to. I just thought it would look a little bit more natural as stenciled flowers can look by doing this. All right, that is as much as I'd like. So now I'm going to match my last layer, and I keep on using this same piece of tape on my stencil here to hold it down so that it's not going to move. I still have a little bit of that color there. I'm just going to add a drop or two of the red to darken it. Oh, that was probably more than I really needed, so I'm not going to be mixing all of that in there. Yeah, I'm going to get a little bit more of the lighter color here. Now this one here is called Saltwater Taffy. There's another paint in this line called Abandoned Coral, and if I had that one, I probably would be using it for this step. because I think it would be the perfect color, but I don't, and I don't have it easily accessible to me that I could get fairly quick, so. But it's still easy enough to just darken a color and lighten a color. There we go. And once again, I'm going to move this to the side. I'm going to take that same brush. I don't need to worry about it being contaminated with the paint that's in there before, because it's all within the same color tone. I'm working on the same flower here. But I'm just going to lightly blend it into the color that's beside it. There, that's good enough. So I am going to completely wash off this stencil, and then while I'm washing it off, this is probably going to dry. I'm going to wash my brushes off as well, and then I'll be back to do the leaf. All right, my flower is pretty much dry. There's a couple spots that are a little bit damp yet, but it's close enough that I think I can work on the next step. And that is just the leaf here. And I'm going to be painting in the stem. So this particular stencil doesn't have a stem with it, so you're going to have to improvise and make one, but fortunately for poppies, their stems are kind of funky and irregular, so you don't really have to worry about being precise with it. So once again, I'm lightening my leaf color. I think I'm going to lighten it just a little bit more. And I'm using a smaller stencil brush for this because the leaf is a little bit smaller than the flower. It's still not going to take very much time at all. All right, so I've got a spot here where there's a light part and a dark part. I'm going to use the light part for the first part of the stem, and I'm going to use the dark part for the detail. So I'm just matching my stencil up here. Take some of the excess off. It's much easier to add a second layer of paint if it needs, rather than attempt to fix if it seeps underneath. And if it seeps underneath, there's no way to fix it. So and once again, by pouncing up and down, you have less chance of things seeping underneath. So the two ways to prevent that is less paint on your brush and tapping up and down. There we go. So there was a little bit that went on my paper, but that is okay. It just kind of gives the leaf a little bit of a fuzzy look to it. I'm going to use that same light color to just freehand the stem here, and I'm making the stem join the bottom of the leaf there. There we go. And then I'm going to do the center of the leaf while that green is wet, same as I did for the flower. So a little bit darker. There's probably going to be less contrast with the leaf color, with the dark, between the dark and the light. Yeah, I can see it, but I'm not sure it'll be visible on the camera. But once again, I'm just going to blend between the dark and the light there. So I'm going to let that completely dry. I'm going to wash my stencil and my brushes again. I'll see you in the next part, and we'll put, nope, I'll see you in a moment, and we'll put the center in the flower. All right, so the last step is the center of the flower. So I just have a gray paint here. You could use black if you want, simply because the centers of poppies are like fairly dark and black, but I didn't want to have a really dark center and then basically that kind of be the focal point of the flower. So once again, just a little bit of paint on your brush, tap up and down, and there we go. Voila. All right, I'm going to let that completely dry, and I'll see you back in the next video, and we will put our card together.